Hello, everyone. All right, lots of stuff going on. Here we go. Hey everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here. Ooh, sorry, it's a little rough on the top there. I have had technical difficulties down to the last second. So thank you so much to Hermano Bonifazi. I am here today to talk about my new course I'm super psyched about, and I'm going to bring in my buddy who has done the course I'm doing the course with, and let me introduce the one and only Brett Papa. What's up, Brett?
Yes.
How's it going, man? How are you doing?
Better now.
Oh.
I thought it was our end. I was like, what are we doing wrong?
No, I mean, my program kept on crashing, and then, anyway, sorry.
Technology these days, I tell you what.
No warming up, no nothing. Oh, my God.
No, that's half the fun, right? 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah, right, let's try this again. Okay, so I do want to talk about, everybody knows I do some lesson stuff at the beginning of the courses, but we have a new course you and I we put out together, and it's called it's called Blues Rock Masters, and this is the British blues version. I've been talking a lot about it here on the feed. I'm talking about my favorite guitar players, David Gilmour, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Jeff Beck. So off the top there was my David Gilmour abomination at the moment. I apologize. It's the one-man show.
It's funny. I remember Jeff came out to my house when we first started working together and doing YouTube stuff. And I forget what we were doing. We were doing like some hard rock, kind of, how to spice up your hard rock blues phrasing or whatever. And then like during the break, you started busting some Clapton. I was just like, hold on a second. Like, do you do this at all anywhere? Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, a little bit here and there. But like, it's one thing, like a lot of people can learn, and you see this all over YouTube or just, if you're a guitar teacher or whatever, you see people that can play, maybe something note for note, but they don't quite have the feel, right? I think like, and seeing like Van Halen is a perfect example. Like you'll go see some of the tribute bands and they have the notes, but the feel isn't there. And that was like, when I saw you do Clapton stuff, I was just like, my God, dude, like you do that it just is, it sounds like Cream, you know? I mean, it was just so like, I was like, dude, we have to go down this path. And then I remember like, well, dude, who else do you like? And then you were like, oh, you know, like Gilmour and Beck. And then you started playing like that. I was just like, hold on, dude, wait a second. What is going on? Like, you have all of these styles down. So in my mind, you know, I'm just like, oh, we have to do something like this because, you know, it's always, you know, working with guitar players, it's funny, like working with people like yourself and you know, other professionals or whatever. There's a group, I think the age range of like 40 to 60, those kind of guitar players play a certain way. And I think it's because like yourself and you know, some of these other people like Tim Pierce and all these others, they grew up listening to these guys as their influences, you know, the Page, the Beck, the Gilmour. And it's just that feel is just something that is I think that's really what did it. Yeah, sure, they broke ground and they played, but like the swagger that all of those guys had is just, I don't want to say it's lost in today because there's some fantastic guitar players out there, but that isn't at the forefront as much as it used to be. And I think I kind of miss that, you know, and I know a lot of players do. So when I saw you do it, I'm like, dude, we have to go down this road, you know.
Thanks.
Because you do it really, really good. As people will see.
Thanks. Well, sorry, I'm just kind of jumping around with some of the technical stuff in front of me here. Well, the fun thing about the course that I really liked was, and I'll be talking about it forever. You guys are on my channel talking about this course coming out for a really long time. And what I want to do is show you each example. Each person has 5 individual licks, and then there's one longer solo that I kind of bring in what I've learned from them, not trying to sound exactly like them, because I didn't think that, I don't want to try to sound exactly like them. And now sometimes I kind of do, to a certain extent, if that makes sense. I mean, I sound like a guy who's listened to a lot of them and played a lot of their stuff.
Yeah.
But
the influence is there, right? Sure. The influence is there, but you still retain your own voice.
Oh, thanks.
And I think that's really the selling point of the course, right? Because you give quintessential licks, like so that one Page lick you do is so good. Yeah. You know, it's like that's Jimmy Page. You know, like you hear it in 2 seconds, it's like that is a complete Jimmy Page lick. But when you do your own spin on Jimmy Page's, you know, that big solo, all the solos are perfect examples of that because you can hear the influence of those players on you, but you're still phrasing with your own voice as well. And I think that's the real difference in this course, in my opinion, is because you're showing somebody how to take the best parts of a player without directly copying that person, right? Yeah. Like if they're a Page fan, you're going to show them Page licks, but then your example is like, well, here's how you kind of incorporate that style with your own thing, you know, and you know, you got it down, dude. It's so good.
Someone said, unfortunately, the link to the course doesn't work. Hold on a second.
Wow.
That is impossible.
I've clicked it. I know that it works.
I'm just going to smack it in here to what I've got right here. Trying it again. Thank you, Zita. We'll check it out. There we go. Okay. So let me just play a little bit. Let me just talk about the Page lick, right? Let's talk about now the one we're talking about. The stuff that I love about Page that you and I have discussed is, and we talk about in the course, is there's like a degree of sloppy, you know, but it's still totally awesome in a way that I love, you know. All right, so let's get this track up here. And then
you got your dragon suit?
It's in the dry cleaners. Okay. So this kind of thing, right? We've got this. He's got this kind of. Right? That kind of move.
Yeah.
Now,
so good.
If we just talk about that lick for a minute, one thing I learned about Page, who was one of my absolute favorites, and I think he's certainly my favorite band of all time. But one thing, he is so out to lunch in his time and his feel, and
Yep.
it's so sloppy in an amazingly great way because it's all full of vibe and swagger and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So people, when I say Jimmy Page is sloppy, I don't mean that in any kind of insulting way. I mean that like, he's
Yeah.
freaking Jimmy Page. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Yep.
In the world, and obviously because the guitar is way down lower than I could ever wear it, But let's just talk about that.
Yeah.
One thing like this lick's on the chorus and a bunch of other ones, but the idea of this kind of lick, we've got this right now. I'm kind of playing it. It sounds a little sloppy, but it's the only way it sounds right.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
true.
only way I found for me, the only way I can play that lick is kind of sloppy. One, it's really freaking hard if you're going to pick all of it, like he does, right? So
Yeah.
it's this,
That tone he uses too. It's like, dude, how do you play with that tone?
right, not a very distorted amplifier going on. So,
No,
like,
exactly.
really what I end up doing, and it sounds totally ridiculous, but it works. Sometimes, like, if I'm
Yeah.
working on, my Yngwie background and all these kind of stuff, and, really working on fine-tuning my alternate picking and shredding and all this stuff. But with this, sometimes I just feel like, because the hand is just moving as fast as it can.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll match up to a large extent, right?
Well, it's
But let me just,
like pure commitment, right? It's
not
like
that,
you
yeah.
you can't be timid about
Right.
it, and that's the cool thing about his style. I remember, I was telling you this, but I remember, when I was working with Tim Pierce a lot, he would go and they would do these. I guess they would re-record songs because there's something with the licensing or something like that, that it's cheaper if you go and re-record the sound or whatever. And he was telling me a story that he was working with this guy, Rob Cavallo, awesome producer or whatever, did like all the Green Day and Dave Matthews stuff. Called him in to do Jimmy Page. And, Tim's super precise,
Sure.
like he's just a really incredible guitar player. But he couldn't do the Page thing because you have to, like what you're saying, that almost non-complete preciseness of it is the vibe. You know what I mean? And so the guy who is the producer, who's a decent guitar player. I mean, he's not great, but like was able to actually pull it off more because it sounded more authentic when he was trying to go for it, rather than Tim, who's a completely incredible, polished player. It was like that piece wasn't missing, and that was the interesting thing about when we decided to do Jimmy Page stuff. Is when I heard you do it, I'm like, that's perfect, because you can play Yngwie and you can play all these other styles, and it sounds just like it. But to be able to like almost purposefully be less precise with more vibe, it's not easy to do. I mean, it's
No, and
I
there's
don't
almost
know.
like a feeling that I have when I play like in that style of just letting go.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, because I don't have this feeling of like, oh my God, I got to play this exactly right each time. So just that lick, that. And then if I just kind of you try to pick all it,
Yeah.
right? And then you have to try to go.
Yeah.
And then if you try to really fine tune it, it becomes extremely
Yeah.
difficult, that lick in itself. But
Yeah.
so I kind of like when I like to channel his stuff, even just kind of like a this kind of thing where maybe Clapton would be a little bit more like each note is sort of more precise. Page is kind of going
Or together. Yeah.
like the hand is just moving the whole time.
Right.
So I think these things are kind of
Yeah.
a ton of fun when we both kind of analyze them throughout the course.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, it's funny. My buddy was, we were talking about Song Remains the Same. And, when you think about it in today's standards, you have like Mateus and all these guys who are just flawless guitar
Jabs?
players, right? I mean,
Mateus
they're
Jabs?
extraordinary in what they can do, right? But you go back and watch Song Remains the Same on a technical standpoint, there's mistakes all over the place. There's open string noise, there's all of this stuff, but you can't tell me that the vibe, and especially some of the blues stuff where he's really going for it, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's not about that anymore. It's about, Page almost like encapsulates pure expression. You know what I mean? It's just in the moment, just complete abandon, going for it, And, watching stuff like Song Remains the Same, or some of those other DVDs they came out with, I can't think of stuff where it's like, you watch a whole performance and it's flawless per se. You know what I mean? There's no like, everything's just super precise. It's not that. It's just complete raw energy, and I think that's part of it, right? It's just total machismo, which is amazing.
We consider and talk about Zeppelin and all these kind of things. What I love is, and somebody I know pointed this out, even when they were playing on the stage in Madison Square Garden, they all stood fairly close together, like a band,
Yeah.
So it was this
totally.
really live interaction. Like it was a living, breathing thing. Nobody cared about the precision of it. And same when you listen to Cream, it was just this thing that was going on. But what we were talking...
Well, it was a jam, right? Because they had to listen to each other because it wasn't necessarily always about the same strict song form. And I think with bands that jam, you have to listen more to everybody else because you don't quite know where everyone's going to go at the same time. Like there's a loose interpretation of what the song's going to be, but like you really have to listen, or it can make it so much better listening to, in their case, Bonham, what he's doing, or John Paul Jones is doing on the bass, and how they interact in real time together. You just don't see that to that degree that much anymore, unless you're like watching Derek Trucks or something like that. Right. But it's amazing, I mean, it's, yeah.
And what I tried to do in the course is, as opposed to just showing you licks, I do show you licks, like here's a real Jimmy Page lick, like the one I just showed you, as an example of how to capture that vibe and that feel when you want to draw upon it. But I feel like, the internet is so full of guys who teach guitar solos note for note perfectly, so there is no reason, first of all, I mean, we don't want to get into that in terms of the copyrights and all these things like that, but they're out there, they're all over the place, so you don't need me to do that. But what I don't see a lot is how people, when they talk about, okay, right here Jimmy Page is using a major pentatonic, he's outlining the 1 chord or the 4 chord, I'll get deep into where he's doing, and I talk a lot about this on the channel, you guys. So I'm really happy to have this out as a course that we can, have tab in the background tracks and the whole thing. And just to be honest, like we've talked about this is how I make my living, So if you really enjoy, if you enjoy the channel and all this, this is a great way to allow me to continue to do all this and get it.
That's how we all do it.
And Brett too,
now,
and get a new light. You guys noticed a new light, huh? Does everything look good?
Yeah, dude, so good. I like. You showed me when we called to do the intro part. I was like, "Wow, dude, it looks so good."
And this is what the Les Paul actually looks like. The other light, I was like, it never looks as good, But
all about the lights.
So I mean, same thing with Gilmour. Like, there's very specific things that he does in his guitar playing that that if I want to draw upon them, as I tried to do in the beginning, I hate when it happens. When I'm just like, oh, all right.
No, it's fine. I mean, dude, the course, it totally speaks for itself. The stuff you did with Gilmour inside of the course. And you'll see that, if they go to click that link, they'll see a promo of you playing some stuff.
Right.
But, your Gilmour stuff.
Make sure everybody's got
Gilmour is obviously a very composed guitar player, I mean, he works stuff out. But with him, especially, how he does his bends and the use of the bar and all that stuff, those are the things that really, because it's just, a lot of these guys, it's just the same blues licks you hear all the time, but it's how they did it in context of the progression they're playing over. So Gilmour, they obviously throw in some outside chords or something like that. But what I love about what you've done in the course is it's the why.
Sure.
These players do what they do. It's not just a lick like, these are 25 amazing, Page licks or whatever. These are Page licks that sound like Page, but this is why he's doing what he's doing over this chord for this reason. These are why these notes work. And in any course I do, that's what I'm trying to, whether it's you or Corey or anybody that we work with, when I talk to you guys in the first place, it's like, I don't want people to just learn licks. I want them to know why they're playing. And I think you did that really well in especially with these styles, in the context of these styles. that comes through really well in the chorus. And that's really, in my personal opinion, that's what it takes to be able to take something like this and put it into your own playing.
Right.
You know what I mean? That helps you understand, oh, okay, this is why I would use this lick over, like what you were saying, over the one chord. You know, why I would use the major pentatonic in this particular way, or why I would bend to this note at this time in the chord progression, because, oh, that note's part of the chord. And, you know, I mean, that whole thing, you did great, man. I mean,
Thanks. Well, one thing that I realized, I look at when I talk about in the course, and we talked about it here on the channel, I feel like David Gilmour has two kinds of solos. They're all composed, and that's the one thing that always made me feel good. Like, how does he play the perfect guitar solo every time? And it's because he wrote it.
A lot of takes.
Yeah, a lot of takes, and then the stories that he's told, and he's flat out about it. I'll record a bunch, piece it all, and then I'll take my favorite spots, and then splice it together and learn it.
And make sure I can play it.
And make sure I can play it. And then he does the recording. So that's why it's always so perfect. But there's two kinds of solos that he does. They're all composed, but there's Comfortably Numb is a perfect example of, there's the first solo in Comfortably Numb, where it is all chord tone based, right? Where it's off of scales, of course, but every note that he's sitting on is a chord tone. And there's a second kind of solo, which is the end of Comfortably Numb, which is a little more like blues lick based. Still composed, but a little more jammy feeling. And the intro was the thing I did, and I add in one thing I was kind of hyped, was like to do, and that I've not seen anybody talk about, was I'm a big fan of Animals, the record Animals. That's my favorite Floyd, and I think Gilmour is just killer on that record. And he did a lot of harmony parts on that record that he didn't really do in any other records. So what I took the opportunity of doing is to show you how to harmonize over the chord changes. So the solo I do is the first section is basically just, you know, like two chords.
Nice.
Yeah. Which is really kind of very final cut.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like I took some of the final cut kind of vibe, because I really love it. Totally underrated record for David Gilmour's guitar playing. So I do the final cut, and I think about those solos. So where I have the harmony, I'm outlining the chord changes, and then talking about how you can harmonize your own stuff, which was a ton of fun to explain on the course, because it adds this whole other level to your own music that if you know how, if you're playing with another guitar player, how you can take advantage of using harmonies, how you construct the harmonies. And then key phrases that Gilmour does, like, you know, half step bends, bending into notes, hitting chord steps, using the ninth a lot, outlining triads, a few like cliches of his that you when you want to kind of like whip him out on a gig, you've got this real, sounds like him.
Well, you know, it's interesting. He, I remember really loving, you know, Clapton and all these great players, but it wasn't until I started learning Gilmour solos that I felt like I started getting a handle on blues phrasing. Yeah. You know, because they are written out solos, but the way he plays notes and the intervals that he chooses, you know, it's hard to, you know, my guitar isn't hooked up, so it's hard to show without an example. I feel naked without it, but so that's why I have it. But how he'll stack notes on top of each other, you know, that kind of stuff, where his blues phrasing is almost more chordal. You know what I mean? In his note choice, you know, like just really taking licks out of, you know, multiple notes in a chord, right? A perfect example is in Comfortably Numb, that first solo. It's literally playing every note of the chord on almost every single, you know, every chord change that they make, right? The A to the D or whatever. And he's literally playing a D chord.
Literally playing the D chord,
Yeah,
well, it's just
but it doesn't sound like that, right? Because of how he does his bends and his vibrato and cool stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, for him, he especially. I mean, I love all the guitar players that you've done here, but me personally, Gilmour, man, he's like the ultimate guitar player to me. You know, especially when it comes to mixing, all things together, like blues. Outlining chord changes and composition all together. It's just, he's astounding. And you know, he's got this huge, you know, bunch of albums, and every single album has 2 or 3 at least textbook examples of perfect guitar playing. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So good.
I'm thinking like, well, for him, and he was my first guitar hero. He and Brian May, really.
Yeah.
The first thing that really wanted me to play guitar, I think, was Stairway. Hearing that on like AM radio or
Yeah.
FM radio when I was a kid, and I've got an older brother, and he would listen to this stuff all the time. But I hadn't seen Jimmy Page, and I got into Pink Floyd through my older brother. And I remember getting Dark Side of the Moon. No, Dark Side, right? And you opened it up, and the posters and stuff fell out, like showing my age, and the stickers. And then there was a poster where they're all kind of green in this green light, you know. And he's got his guitar, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. You know?
Yeah.
Like that's
Sold.
Yeah.
Sold. I need to be a rock star.
And then seeing Jimmy Page and going, that's really what I want to do. Like just with the dragon suit and the whole thing. Then
mystical creature.
You know, and it's funny, like the guys that then I got into Clapton later. Like for me, Clapton was one of those guys. I had only known him. I'd known Cream, but I didn't understand Cream when I was younger because I don't know what it was. And then
it takes a little bit of sophistication. Like you got to hear some things.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was cool. Like Sunshine Your Love was cool, but it was, you know, growing up in New York, there was like WPLJ and his classic rock radio, and you'd hear this stuff over and over. At that point, I was getting super heavy into metal, which I still am. And so I wasn't paying as much attention, but I'll get back to him in a second. But the underlying guy that went through everything was Jeff Beck. And the crazy thing about Beck was he is, when I was listening to him, which has always been through my whole guitar playing existence, thanks to my older brother, I didn't realize what I was listening to, if that makes sense. Like I didn't realize how insanely difficult he was to get. And, you know, so in the course I talk about a lot of isms that I've picked up from him. And he uses the bar a lot, but I did some stuff with the bar, a fair amount, because I think it's, you know, that's, how can you not? But also just a bunch of things without the bar, you know, the idea of approaching each note. And I think about Beck, he always surprises me.
Yeah.
Right? There's always something.
Dude, he just keeps getting better and better, too, which is crazy. It's like, dude, you're 70-something, and you're
77
as good as you ever were, if not better. It's like, whatever,
it's really inspiring, and it's got nothing to do with playing fast or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just this absolute, you know, connection between he and the instrument, which is really inspiring. And then I got into Clapton later, actually, like a little later, when I started really digging in.
Me too. I mean, totally. Me too. Exact same thing. Like I didn't appreciate him until way later. After, you know, one of my favorite guitar players ever is Neil Schon. And when I saw like back in the like 80s, they used to do these like guitar interviews with like guitar heroes, and it was like Nuno Bettencourt and Neil Schon or whatever. I forget what the series was called, but he talked about Clapton like as being God to him as a kid. I'm like, wow. I mean, how does that? What do those two have to do with each other at all? You know, because to me, like Neil just encapsulates everything in one. I mean, his terrifying phrasing, such good blues guitar playing. But now, when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, oh, I get it. Or John Mayer for a recent example. You know, obviously when he started out, very Stevie Ray Vaughan, but you could tell as his playing progressed, when he started hanging out with Clapton, and then he lived with Clapton for a while, and then after that time, and he came back out, it was like he quantum leaped in his guitar playing, you know? And I think now when I hear Clapton, I get it. I'm like, oh, you know, I can hear, because, you know, Clapton isn't necessarily note choice, as you well know. It's the timing. Like his timing is so different, you know, and you don't notice it in the context of a song because it sounds so natural. But if you go and you try to listen and play a Clapton solo note for note, it's not always like, boom, like the snare hits and he's lining up with it. Like sometimes he's off and it sounds, when you hear it by yourself, I'm like, that can't be right.
Well, there's like a
but
push
it's how he does it.
Yeah, there's a push and pull when he plays.
Yeah.
And anybody great, you know, all the guys we're talking about, but you know, Beck and Page and Clapton, they all have that. Like Gilmour is more, you know, like I said, refined in a certain way, you know, and but the other guys are coming from a much more improvisatory background, because you know, that's just where they came from. But the stuff I got from Clapton, we've talked a lot about it once again on the channel. If you're new, if you've got to poke around, we're talking about British blues and all that. Is Clapton's real, like
Well,
those kind of little.
you showed me one time those where he does those little micro bends, and it was a really great lesson. But if you could go over that's super cool, because like when you start to tweak that third and those other notes, that really seems to start to get you into that
The first
world. Like, what are some common places that you would do that, like in a position 1 of a minor scale or whatever?
So we're talking A minor, or A7. The first thing would be your flat 7 tweak, like. So it's the flat 3 and the flat third. So if I get my flat third, which would be C, and really spending some time. Now, if I don't do the tweak on the flat 3 and the flat 7, right? But right, that's that kind of sound. So and then having real control over the bends. Now, and the period I primarily focus in on is the Cream Blues Breakers era. And you and I have talked about, obviously we're going to do most stuff in the future, focusing in maybe a bit more on him and that era, because I'm such an...
No, I mean, dude, you're so good at that style, man. Like, it's funny, when I hear you play like that, and I know I've read this about Eddie, but like Clapton was his favorite guitar player too, supposedly.
Well,
and those little
favorite.
bends.
It's weird.
Yeah, Eddie's favorite, right? So when I hear you do that, it's like I can hear that in his playing. You know what I mean? Because he has all that swagger too. Even though he's very unorthodox in a lot of the things that he does. When he plays blues, he sounds like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like you can tell his influence, all those little bends. He does that all over the place.
I mean, you think about it, there's a ton of guys too. There's
yeah.
Well, let me just talk about some of my heroes. Like Michael Schenker. Like if you get into Schenker, you start to realize that I hear a lot of Jeff Beck in his playing. I hear a lot of Jimmy Page in his playing, and a ton of Eric Clapton. And he does his own thing with it. But when I started kind of listening, even doing this course and going, oh, like that Page kind of lick of that, like.
Yeah.
That kind of thing right there. Schenker's like. So it's kind of like a smoother Page, which is really kind of fun to hear. And a lot of the bends that you're hearing him do.
Schenker's so freaking good, man.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate that and him as much. He's a little bit more of an unsung. I mean, in this day and age, in
the States too. I think in Europe he was always really huge.
Man, how young he was. Oh, God, he was so good. It's ridiculous. Just working with a bunch of guitar players too, bringing up Beck. Mm-hmm. Every, I would say, top level, really amazing session guy, especially on the West Coast. Every single one of them, Jeff Beck's their favorite guitar player, like hands down. Yeah. Every one of them, and we're talking like guys like Lyle Workman. And if you haven't seen Lyle's latest post off his new album,
it's insane.
He's one of the most terrifying guitar players you'll ever see in your life.
It's insane.
And when he comes in, I remember last time he came in when I was working at Divided by 13, he had just been to a Jeff Beck show, and he's like, came in with his hands up, like, I don't even know. I've got nothing on this guy. And it's not, and I get what he's saying. It's not the technical ability, because Lyle, I mean, he's as good as anybody on earth.
Yeah.
But but I get what he means. You know what I mean? It's like Jeff Beck just has this thing. It's not fast, although he can play quicker, but he doesn't typically. It's just all the little perfect intonations of the bar, or just what he can do spontaneously.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's never the same. But what he can do on any given night in any given song is just, it's breathtaking.
Well,
I mean, it's just like, I get it. Like, after Lyle told me that, I'm like, Jeff Beck? Like, I wasn't really that big of a fan. And then, you know, YouTube had, fortunately for me, had just kind of kicked off. And then I could go back and watch him play, and I was like, oh my God. Well, he's right. Yeah. This guy's terrifying. You know, it's just.
Well, one thing I think that incredible. He does, and I talk about in the course too, is like a simple thing. You can kind of enter any note. One quick thing is I'm going to enter a note from a half step below, right? So whether it doesn't, I'm really, I got all this stuff going on. I'm really buzzy today. But so like, instead of doing like, right? Yeah. So I'm just playing the flat 5, so. So that flat 5. And then what I talk about in the video, like, I mean, he might go nowadays, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. Super buzzy on his strat today, but, right? But we could think about the same thing. Right, so just any way to reimagine how to play the note. And so it was important to me. This is really one kind of fun thing that working with Robin, which has been fun. And guys in my channel, I play my Strat a lot. And Robin, I did a few gigs with Robin. He's like, yeah, don't play a Strat anymore. And I was like, what? You know? Yeah. And his reasoning was because I was doing some of those things have become such a part of my playing. He was like, I'm not hearing you as much. I'm hearing like, you know, Jeff Beck and Hendrix and even and Landau, you know, like he used a lot of this stuff. So what I talk about in the course too is I've just worked out some of the ideas without a bar, because I started pretty much specifically just leaning towards a Les Paul in the past few years, just for this particular reason, you know, and I figured, wow, maybe just try to work in some of these ideas on my own that I really love and not use the bar. So I talk about that too. So you don't have to have a bar to be able to do it. There are some things, but you can work down your own thing. But, you know, the stuff that I really was that.
Yeah, the guy that does the editing here, his name's Josh, and we were driving to lunch the other day, and we were putting together the promo, and you do this super cool Beck, like it has a bar. It's like, it was just, and I started humming it, and Josh was like, "That's stuck in my head all day too."
Funny,
but it's this really. It's a seductive sound. Oh, man. You know what I mean? It's really like, this is a horrible example of it, but like this Chris Isaak Wicked Game, that like mysterious kind of like, he's so good at that thing. And the song that got me into Jeff Beck, that sold me on Jeff Beck was, you know, back in the day, what was it? Columbia House, or who used to send
the Columbia House Records?
The CD club or whatever.
And then for like a penny, 9 CDs for a penny, and then they charge you like $87 for each CD after that.
Totally, yeah. If you didn't do it right, it was like $100 bill.
That's how they got you.
And I remember one of the 20 CDs that I ended up paying for that I didn't plan on having was a Jeff Beck one, and it had that song "Brush with the Blues" on it, and it was live.
Wait, how old are you?
And I heard that, and I'm like, I'm sold. Like that got me. That and back in the late 90s, when I heard his version of Manic Depression with Seal, I was like, wow. Like, to me, my favorite Beck was always when he played with a singer.
Yeah,
sure. And now there's so much good stuff out there now that I appreciate him with or without one. But to me, that always sold me. Like, how he played in a band. Even the stuff he did with Bon Jovi was, like, amazing, you know? So he was like you know, there's very few shred guys, you know, or instrumentalists that can end up being with a band and really selling it just as well. And I feel like he's one of those players. With or without a singer, he's just as good.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
And I like that he sounds like a singer when he plays. So that's the thing, you know, that kind of, you know, we did some of the bar stuff, like, you know, getting that kind of control over, and you can bend your harmonics, you know.
Ah, so
You know what I mean? So this is the kind of things I have to really shy away from because
well, he's almost a perfect example of what you've done in the course too, where you can hear all the influences, and you can hear Hendrix, you can hear all these players, Clapton, all those players in his playing too, but you still automatically know it's
in
him.
Beck's playing. Well, I mean, he came at the same time, so I'll fight you on that one.
Yeah.
They're all friends and stuff.
Well, no, but you know what I mean. That's what I mean. Like, and that's why I say that specifically because, especially back then, music almost had a competitive nature to it. And so you would see Hendrix down the road and you're like, well, crap, I got to be able to do that now too. This guy's blowing us all off the stage.
Yeah, totally.
So you hear how he was influenced by that. Not that Hendrix is better or Clapton is better, but the same with Clapton. I'm sure he walked into a bar one night and heard Clapton just on fire and was like, okay, I got to up my game.
The famous story that Hendrix got on stage and jammed with Cream, and Clapton was like, "Shit, you didn't tell me that he was that good." To Chaz Chandler, and he did, Phil is asking this question. Thank you, Phil. Yes, the course does come with PDFs, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and Guitar Pro.
Guitar Pro and background tracks. Yeah. And how long is the course? Like 8 hours?
Yeah, I mean, we geek out on some interview stuff, but yeah, I mean, some of the lessons where you break down songs, you get really in depth with, and that's what I loved about the course too, is it's not just here's a lick, and that's it. What I really want to do in my own courses, and what I always do with everybody, is go deep. Because when I was a kid and watched guitar courses, whether it's George Lynch or anybody back in the day, I'm like, okay, I get the lick, but where did it come from? Like, what influenced you? And that's what I always, want you and everybody else to do is give us the why.
Well, it's bad teaching if you don't do that.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, and then it prompts the person to go back and listen themselves, and then you understand, like, oh, that's where that's coming from, Well, so I feel that's a really important part. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like over 8 hours. So, I mean, it's huge. And I love doing that. My whole thing in this space is there's plenty of great, 2 hour or less courses out there. There's lots of companies that do that so good. I'm like the guy who geeked out on the whole process. Like, no, I want to know the whole thing. Like, give me the backstory, the why, the lick, the tone, the everything. Like, I want to know it all. And so when I produce a course, I like to do that. I prefer to do much more of a deep dive into stuff. And that's just the way I, selfishly, because that's what I want to know.
I think it's good teaching. And I like that we have the long form. So it's almost like the YouTube channel here, but with tabs and, us talking about these things, which if you don't want to watch that, we also are, I'm teaching a lot.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of questions
there's
too. Can I get to some of those?
Oh yeah, go.
Yeah. Phil's going, we have questions. Okay. Can you expand on why, how, when Jeff Beck moved from playing with a pick to playing with his fingers? This is David Cromwell. Yeah, I don't know the exact era, but it was like the mid 70s, and he just had said that he just felt like he got a lot more control over his guitar playing. And at that point, if you really kind of interestingly notice that he doesn't play rhythm guitar the same way anymore. Right? He doesn't really play rhythm guitar now in a traditional sense, much like Mark Knopfler, who plays with his fingers. He plays rhythm guitar, but you don't hear Mark Knopfler or Jeff Beck going like, like you hear Page do or someone like that. You don't hear it because he's not playing with a pick. His might be like,
Yeah. It's more tech.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's that. Out of tune there. So I think it was around the 70s. That's when he kind of switched over, and I never even thought twice of that. I didn't even know it. I got him too much later and realized like, oh, that's when he uses fingers. It makes me understand how a lot of the licks that he plays now can be done, like some of the double stop stuff, or really having that much control over the bar. As you'll see in the course, because if you're not holding a pick, you can just kind of hold the bar in your hand, like between your fingers like this. And I talk to you guys about how my guitar is set up and everything, so we can set up the bridge for Jeff Beck, and we go into that nerdy stuff, and some gear stuff too. Yeah. But
I can't believe that, Marshall.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, the whole course. Well, the course was shot in two places, pre-pandemic at Brett's house, and then the rest was done here. And I use the Marshall Origin on all of the Jimmy Page and the Eric Clapton stuff. So people are like,
Well, and the stuff at my house is a program.
Yeah,
It's
plugins.
it's the Buxom Betty on my Universal Audio. With Jeff's pedal board. But it just goes to show you, like, so much of the sound and the tone. I mean, the tones are great that you got, but so much of it is just really just in your hands. And that's the thing I really appreciate about when I started to do the more of a deep dive with Beck, and I stopped playing with the pick as much. As a player, I would highly suggest everybody spend time without a pick, because especially if you have some technical facilities on the guitar, like you can really pick fast or whatever, you can't do that with without a pick, and you really have to spend a lot more time playing something meaningful.
Yeah, it forces you to play
and
differently.
you realize, like, snaps and all those little things that you can do with your fingers. It's like, oh, I get it. Like, there's a thing, there's a reason.
Sound. Yeah, there's.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we got tons of questions. Hey, Corey. I don't know if Corey's still here. Corey Congilio, Jason Lachlan.
Woohoo!
Yeah, all my friends. Zeta, Sam Stamos, SB Nesbitt, Steve Roberts. Thanks to Phil Mingan, as always, doing the fantastic job moderating and pushing everything. All right. And once again, guys, thank you so much for anybody who's picking up the course. This is, as we know, this is how we make our living. And I really appreciate all the support you've always done. And I think I'm really happy with this course. Thank you, Glenn, for picking it up. Thank you, everybody who's picking up Glenn Cooper.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks, Glenn.
Let's see what we got. This is the first time you've seen Jeff in a baseball hat. Yeah, this is my Brett tribute.
Yep, I made him keep it on. He's like, I'm gonna go change hats. I'm like, no, dude, come on.
And
baseball hat.
And literally, at 4:00, I was still getting my program OBS and running. Kept on crashing. So, just jumping on.
No choice.
Just jumping on a line and playing. I'm like, should I play? All right, you guys know me, warts and all. That was me playing. I know I can do it, but man, whew. All right. So let's get some questions.
Also, if people want to see, we put a promo up, and so there's some clips on that. If you follow that link and just want to check out what's in it, you'll see plenty of him
I'm just hitting the
playing.
link again. That's this one, I believe.
Yeah.
I hope so. Okay, I'm taking down the questions. Can you expand on? No, I already just did that. I already talked about that. It's Phil. This is Black Hat Music thinks Animals is the only he always thought he was the only one that thought Animals was his best playing. I know a lot of people feel that way. That Animals was just kind of like the Gilmour record where he got cut loose to do his thing.
There's a lot of great stuff on there.
Interesting. This is from Mike Anderson. You can hear more of a Beck influence when I'm playing my Strat, and then a little more Gibson influence when playing with Robin Ford. So yeah, sure. Someone is mentioning 10 years after underrated. Oh, I love Alvin Lee. One of my first guitar heroes. Going Home was the first time I heard that. I was like, that was before I heard Clapton.
So,
I had the 10 years after his greatest hits and the live record. Alvin Lee is the best. Okay, getting other questions. Do you know what Brett's purple amp is? Is it for Prince tunes? Divided by.
It's purple is my favorite color. That is a divided by 13 BTR 23.
There you go.
Yep. And the fun little fact about this story is sometimes you can see it in the other shots, like when I teach my videos, but there's these little green dots on it. And I'm not a huge, Soundgarden fan. I appreciate the band. But he actually took that. This amp is when they reunited and then they went back on the road, he took that amp out there. So he's got his settings on there. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's how you set it for Soundgarden.
Excellent.
But no, when I worked there, I made it. That amp, actually, the other guy that worked there with me, Scott, I had one of the first 23s they ever made. And I remember this guy that played for Henley, I think his name's like Frank Sines or something, just wicked guitar player. And he came in with a Telecaster and he plugged straight into the amp. He cranked it up and I was like, that's the best guitar tone I've ever heard in my life. The problem back in the day was there was no master volumes on those amps. So I remember telling Fred one day, I'm like, that amp would be the best amp ever if it just had a little bit more gain and it had a master volume, because I used to have to variac it down. It's like even getting the hemisphere being able to play with the band because it was so loud,
Yeah.
But yeah, love that thing.
Those are great amps. I like that when I was at your place.
Yeah.
If you guys are and Sarah, I think, hey Richard, what's going on? Hey James Hogan, Joe Ho, in the house. Personal friend of mine.
Speaking of monster guitar players,
totally. Have you guys ever tried to learn a song and had to scrap it due to difficulty? You decide it's time to let it go, or do you modify it and make it more achievable? All of the above.
Yeah.
I tried to learn some Alan Holdsworth.
Oh my God!
And I'm like,
I'm sorry.
I just can't. What am I doing?
What do you do? His hand's like this big too, so it's like
right. Those if I can. Those kind of licks, which of course, a little more gain. And, one thing that's really interesting, I talk about this in the channel, like if you want to play like Alan Holdsworth, nobody plays like Alan Holdsworth, but things you want to take into account, like I'm using 10s and I have kind of like medium action. Like Holdsworth played with really, really light strings and low action, a lot of compression and gain. So I'm not saying, those are things to think about when you're trying to copy something like really difficult. You're like, well, Eddie didn't play with 11s and high action. He played 9s to my understanding. And, when I watched some Schenker the other night with the Temple of Rock on Amazon, and he's ripping, and I'm like, he's using 9s. Like, I can just see the thickness of the string and the way he's vibratoing, and I'm like, those are lighter strings. Like, if you want to get that...
Yngwie, all those guys, dude. Yngwie, too.
Yep, and the tone,
Super
you can hear is a lighter string than a heavier string. So those are important things. Just pointing out, sometimes you're trying to learn something, and you're like, this is killing me. Sometimes it's just, if you got like a telly with high action and 11s, then you're just, certain things are just not going to work in your favor. But
it's not an excuse, it's an understanding.
Exactly. I like that. But sometimes I just let it go, or I just say, let me grab what I can from that and then try to work it into my own playing. So much of this stuff, like with some of the, the Beck licks or something, I'm just like, well, that's pretty specific to him and difficult to get, so I'm just going to steal what I can from it. All right. Gotta say, Jeff, you are a dude. A dude? I am a dude. Yeah,
sweet.
All right.
You're so doodly, dude.
All right. You should see the inside work of Jeff's New York City apartment. HGTV would be proud. Yeah, I am fortunate to have some of the old place with some of the original woodwork. So I'm just gonna rip it out and put it in.
When I first saw your courses, and then I ended up getting onto your website somehow, and I'm like, dude, Jeff's house would be like the ultimate place to film stuff at. It just had that like super awesome classic, like it was like for your album cover or something. You had pictures of the inside of your house, and I'm like, wow, what a cool pad.
It's that old Brooklyn, the old woodwork. Yeah, sure. Which of course comes with all the other things.
Right.
All right. Is there any Peter Green in the course? Not yet, but we've talked about this. This is just kind of people I want to continue to go with. Like, I could have done a 24-hour course with all my favorite guitar players, Yeah. And Peter Green, is one of my absolute favorites. The course is not this. He's not in this round. But
well, that's what we talked about. My thinking was, after I heard Jeff do this course, he's so good at picking up the essence of all these players that it's like, I was asking him, and you mentioned Peter Green, and I'm like, we got to just keep going down this road because, again, sure, the licks are great, but what I think that people are going to get from this course, almost regardless of their level, because I know a lot of players that are technically really good, that want to have something else to their playing, and they're like, what is it? And I know what it is, that people want to have the feel, of the Van Halens, of the Claptons, of the, all these, the Becks, and these courses and what you're doing, and how, as a course producer, how I would love to continue working with you is you're so good at really getting that across, and that doesn't happen that often. It's hard to find somebody that can play that way, but B, find somebody that can teach what they're doing and how to do that. And that's, very unique thing, and that's something I really appreciated. And working with you especially is just that to me, it's like, yes, this is what kids need to see, or older players that are playing in bar bands or wherever you're at, right? They need to see this. It's the feel. It's the feel. It's the feel. Eddie, the reason everybody likes Eddie is because of his feel. The reason you like Clapton or Beck or Page is the feel.
For sure.
A lot of times they played the same notes, the same licks, but they have their own personality in it. And I think there's so many great players today, but it's starting to sound like there's no voice, there's no like, that is Beck, you know what I mean? And a lot of the modern players, it's a culmination of, you can hear, oh, that sounds like Stevie Ray Vaughan, or that sounds like this person or that person or whatever. And I think
what's always been what's always been important to me, I think, as a teacher and as a guitar player, is everybody can do it to a certain extent. And one of the things I try to point out in this course and everything I teach is the attitude, or have the attitude, that you can do it. A lot of it is just being aware of certain things, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're aware about how Clapton vibratos, and if you start thinking about it, you start like actively listening to his vibrato, and you got to practice it. You got to work on it. I've worked on it for a long time, that sort of sound. And it's become my own thing, but I've learned vibrato from him, you know what I mean? And a lot of other guitar players. And a lot of it is like active listening. So I just talk about that all the time. If you listen to the way he plays that, listen to the original version, listen to how he's vibrato and how he's digging in, and now you try it. Then let's try it together. You try it, you try it. Then you got to go back and forth, and then you really start to refine it. And then kind of once you have it, or once you're aware of it, the feel starts to sink in. Years later, it's not a by tomorrow kind of thing, but it's key elements, to playing well.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying there. It's a lot of players, they learn licks, and it's about the memorization of the lick, and it's mind. It's not. I don't want to sound like it's spiritual or whatever, but the heart isn't in it, right? It's the mind is memorize something, and until somebody really points out the nuance, that's like the perfect fusion, right? The technique becomes there, and then it's the fusion of the technique and the heart, or whatever you want to call it, that makes the great players. Because there's no notes that don't mean something in a Gilmour solo. Right. They all are deliberately played, in exactly the way he played them for a purpose. He's invoking emotion. You know what I mean? And I think that's what all these guys really do. They can emotionally draw you in, there's a Gilmour solo, what is it, off of a Division Bell, Coming Back to Life. And it's, I love all the shredders, but like, if I was going to put the top 5 guitar solos that I've ever liked, Gilmour's in 2 of the spots, for sure. Just because it's so good.
They're also in the best songs. So like, to me, like Cream, I love Cream's records, and I love those Jeff Beck records, and my favorite Beck playing is in his favorite tunes, and Jimmy Page, well, it's all great. And
it's hard to go wrong.
And it's funny, people are chiming in like, what about this guitar player? There's only room for 4, so I grabbed my 4 favorite. Like, man, I mean, people are asking about Mark Knopfler, one of my all-time favorites. I was just talking about the British blues, like the earlier British blues guys, kind of the guys in the 60s and 70s. There's Mark Knopfler. There's, there's so many,
So is that a British Blues Volume
2? Could be, yeah. And then we talked about, one thing I really want to get into, and we're going to do this, is the heavier roots and stuff I have. So almost like, I would say 80s metal, but I think Angus Clark,
hard rock.
It's like pre-shredder guys, like, the Schenkers and Iomis and even like, man, I was listening to those Ozzy records with Jakey Lee, and one of my favorites, but going back into it and going, oh man, he's even better than I remember, if that's possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
dude, what I love about YouTube now is that all the isolated guitar tracks.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And two examples. A, you have to listen to the Bark at the Moon one, because Jake is just on fire. Like the whole song is just complete owning guitar. You know, the rhythm playing, everything. But then just recently I've been doing, you know, some Van Halen lessons or whatever, and working up some Van Halen songs. And I went back and I listened to Eddie's Dance the Night Away track, which is, you know, it's like a pop song. And it's like, I just kind of like, yeah, it's great, whatever, Van Halen too. You know, but you go back and you listen to it and you're like, wow, this is like a masterpiece in rhythm guitar playing. You know, like, you just don't. I think some of these guys, it's so good, and the whole thing is so good that you hear it as a totality, right? But then when you go back and you pull out their specific piece, you're just like, this is like, it's more than I appreciate it even more now.
If you thought that was possible, right? You know.
Yeah, right. Like the Van Halen stuff, I'm like, you're already the king, dude. Like, you're it for me. And then I went back and listened to it, and I'm like. Hendrix is another example. Vibe, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, because he is one of my all-time favorites, hands down. But I remember going back and listening to some of that stuff, and what sounds more precise on the album, you hear it and you realize, oh, there's string noise, and there's an open string that he obviously didn't mean to hit. You know what I mean? But there's all this stuff going on, but it's the vibe. Again, back to the feel, right? Sure. It's the feel that sells it, you know? And, you know, when you hear all that stuff in the context of a band, you don't hear a lot of that stuff anyways. But man, you still feel it, you know?
Well, sorry, just a few quick questions here. Can you explain the 7 modes again for the 1,142nd, 617th time?
Yeah, please, I need to know.
Oh, that's pretty funny, man. That's great. Thank you, Black Hat Music. That's funny. Jeff, you like to buy Jeff's hat. My actual hat is kind of gross, but it is a farm in Pittsburgh that a friend of mine owns called Rivendale. So you could check it out online, Rivendale Farms. They will sell you a hat.
Sweet.
All right. So yeah, I just want to kind of close out. We've been on for a while. If there's any more questions, let me know. But yeah, the course is being officially launched Friday, Thursday, Friday, tomorrow, Friday? Yeah,
right, yeah.
Friday, and it's available right now. So this link, we were coming on, we wanted to get down together, and we're doing a live feed on your channel.
Yep, Saturday at noon Central.
So 1 o'clock my time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put in, if you guys want to catch that stream, I'm gonna put in some of the clips from the course. Yeah. So you'll be able to see some of the actual performances and that kind of stuff. I think we're going to do like the Beck and maybe the Clapton one, put the whole, you know, like where you break down the whole song style performance and stuff like that, so people can see more of what's in it.
But so just, you know, in kind of closing, once again, you know, thanks to everybody who's picking up the course. Some people said they picked it up. It's on sale, you know, $30 off the 8-hour course. And, you know, it always sounds like a thing, but it's the truth. It's how we make our living, both Brett and I and Corey and everybody, all my True Fire recordings. It's how we make our living. So we really appreciate you picking it up, because then it helps support what we do. Because, you know, doing YouTube things, it's not, not the way you make your living.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, some people can do it, but you got to get
millions and millions.
So, and one thing I wanted to say really quick, people ask me, all the time, you know, because my courses in the collaborations are they're at a higher price point than most courses, and there's reasons for that. You know, like we were saying, it's and when I break it down this way for people, they understand. You know, the course may be $80 a list price, but it's 8 hours. You know, so when you figure that and you think about that, it's $10 an hour.
You can watch it over and over.
For a course. They're 4 or 5 times longer sometimes than most courses, you know, and it's very in depth. I want people to, these are things that I want people to go all in, you know, like if you really want to understand this, and it's why I get you and the other people that I work with, you'll leave with something. You'll leave not only with, you know, the ability to play better, to implement the styles and stuff like that, but you leave with a little piece of musical history, you know what I mean? So you can start going down those roads that made Jeff who he is, or whatever that he is. So I want it to be like an immersion into a style, rather than just, you know, you're going to leave with, you know, 10 Stevie Ray Vaughan licks or whatever like that, which is great. I mean, that has its place too. But it's you'll leave with the licks. You'll know why, you're playing the licks. You'll know how to play that lick over a chord progression, and you'll understand how he got to that place. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a history and guitar learning all at once, and that's kind of the justification for the whole why people.
Yeah, I think it's a great.
They're massive courses.
Yeah, they're massive courses. They take a lot of time and effort to put together. So some of you guys may have noticed I also have a little bit of merchandise in my store now.
Good for you, a little merch. But
I got the white T-shirt with a little caricature by this guy Mike Norton drew.
Oh,
and
nice.
I got the Jeff-McErlain logo. It's mugs and T-shirts. Only white right now.
Oh, but you got.
I ordered the white because I got to get the other color. I got to get the printing PD. I turned around so there's black for the white for the black shirts.
Oh, yeah,
So I got to do that. This is like a guy doing a million things at once, as you can tell. And
you need an assistant.
I need an assistant.
Virtual assistant.
But thanks so much, guys, for being here. We really appreciate it, and for everyone who picked up the course, really thank you so much. And I will. Yeah, and thanks for all the support on the channel. It's growing. I'm going to keep on doing this. And please join me and Brett on Brett's channel, 12 p.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Central Time on Saturday. Yeah, it's coming Saturday. Yep. We'll show actual clips from the course. I don't have that capability. I think you're going to have your assistant there with you. Yes. And I don't have that, yes, and somebody just said, can you imagine waking up with Jeff on your cup? Yes. So, very funny.
At least the coffee's going to be good.
So thanks so much, guys. JeffMcErlain.com. Check it out there. Check out the link here. Shortly, it'll be available through my website. I just trying to put it together myself. It's all coming together real fast. So just check out the link here, and you can pick up the course. Hey, David Air Parker bought the course. Thank you, David, from Australia. Thank you. Yes, and the other guys have already bought the course. Mike Anderson bought the course. Glenn Goodbreck got the course. So,
awesome.
You guys are the best. Thank you so much. And I will see you hopefully with Brett on Saturday at 12 Central Time. And I'll have my snappy new light, and we're good to go.
Oh, check you out. Your portrait, Jeff.
It's the, what is it?
I like it because you see that you actually have color to your skin now.
It's hard, man. It's so crazy. The lighting and everything.
Dude, it's tough,
crazy.
Man.
And now look up.
I'm so glad to have Josh here. He's helping me with all the stuff. It's like, no, this light needs to be less bright, more bright. It's a tough world to get into.
Now, like I'm in a Rembrandt painting.
Right, exactly.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Bye-bye.